A press conference between Donald Trump and Brazil's President Lula was just canceled. The press, they were waiting in the press room for over 2 hours, and then they were told to immediately leave by security. We know that there has been a lot of tension between Donald Trump and President Lula of Brazil. President Lula has been standing up against Donald Trump's fascism and authoritarianism as Trump imposes illegal tariffs against Brazil, as Donald Trump tries to prop up Jair Bolsonaro, the insurrectionist former president of Brazil, who Trump is now sanctioning. Brazil's Supreme Court leaders, as well as others who have held Jair Bolsonaro accountable. Donald Trump's trying to free Jair Bolsonaro. And you have Brazil really asserting itself against Donald Trump through President Lula, extending the hand to other countries for multilateralism and building alliances against Donald Trump in his go it alone or go it with Putin approach. Let me show you the moment where security was asked to leave from this press conference that was supposed to take place. Let me show you this moment. Here, play this clip.
It's a video.
And here you'll see the press leaving the White House, especially the Brazilian press. They were there. It was supposed to take place at 11:15 Eastern time. And you'll see the press leaving 3-4 hours later. They were just waiting. And Lula and Trump were supposed to come out, or there was either going to be an Oval Office presser, and then they do the presser in the White House press room. That didn't happen. You can see it was on the schedule right here, just so we can all see that it was scheduled for 11:15 a.m. Eastern time. And here the press is leaving. Let's play this clip. And I want to just show you right now how state regime media, which calls itself Fox, was reporting on this. They kept on telling the audience, don't worry, Donald Trump and President Lula, they're going to be showing up. We're just moments away. And then they never showed up. Watch this compilation of what went down all morning on state regime media, which calls itself Fox.
Now, yes, we have Iran in our sights. Meanwhile, we have a live look at the White House as we await President Trump to speak. He is meeting in the Oval Office with Brazil's president, and they have a couple of big issues to go over.
And Sandra, a lot in question this afternoon.
Finding out soon enough as we do await President Trump any moment now. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. This is... All right, Fox News alert here. We are waiting President Trump. He is set to speak any moment now from the White House. We will see if he makes any new comments on the breaking news on Iran. On President Trump set to speak live from the White House any moment now. We've got our eye on it. We could get some brand new news on Iran amid the President Trump, meanwhile, is set to speak. We promise. We just haven't gotten word when that's happening. But he is set to speak live from the White House any moment now as he is meeting with the president of Brazil. President Trump posting on Truth Social moments ago with an update on his meeting with the president of Brazil, which happened at the White House just a short time ago. He writes, quote, just concluded my meeting with the Brazilian president, the very dynamic president of Brazil. We discussed many topics, including trade, specifically tariffs. The meeting went very well, says President Trump. Our reps are scheduled to get together to discuss certain key elements. Additionally, meetings will be scheduled over the coming months as necessary. We were hoping, John, that we were going to get to see the two of them, as it was sort of, we were led to believe that, but we did not. But it sounds like the meeting went well, and he has parted ways. And the president, I don't believe that we'll see the president shortly then.
Now, David Alendante, Spanish reporter, a reporter from Madrid, he was in the room. Here's what he said. He goes, from the White House with Lula and Trump, however you look at it, this is not usual. Here it is relatively common for an event closed to the press to end up opening by Trump's decision. What is strange is the opposite, that the press was summoned to this event. It was open to the press, and then it is closed. And according to the Trump-related sources, they've now been saying it was Brazil's fault, that Brazil didn't want to answer tough questions. Donald Trump leaked that to the Daily Wire, and now they're blaming Lula for what just went on. Here's how they're describing it on state regime media, what just took place. Here, let's play this clip right here.
Well, I was joking with the White House official this morning when the press pool got called and then got sent back when it looked like we weren't going to be going into the Oval Office, that it wasn't expected to be a warm and fuzzy meeting anyways, because the President of the United States and the President of Brazil have had a rather fraught relationship, shall we say, and have said some rather unkind things about each other in public. So I was wondering if President Trump really wanted the opportunity for Lula da Silva to be sitting next to him in the Oval Office, or if they would prefer to not have the cameras roll on.
Which also led me to wonder if the meeting ended abruptly, but it sounds like President Trump wants everybody to know the meeting went well.
Yeah, and as David Alandante explained, something strange is happening. Lula and Trump are meeting for the moment without cameras in an Oval Office closed to the press, a visit loaded with underlying tensions over Bolsonaro, the former insurrectionist leader of Brazil, tariffs, Cuba, and Venezuela. And then when the press were told to leave, everyone in the Trump regime was like, fake news, fake news. What do you mean fake news? This public meeting was canceled, and it seems that it was Donald Trump who was the one who shut this thing down. And Lula and Trump, there seemed to be something going on behind the scenes there. Let me just remind you what Lula has been saying recently about Donald Trump and the Trump regime. Here's what he writes, or here's what he said at a recent speech that he gave. We must stop telling lies about others in order to destroy them. Latin America is portrayed as a world of drug trafficking. The Arab world is portrayed as a world of terrorism. And who is good in this world? He said the invasion of Iraq was a lie. Where are the weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein supposedly had? They never were found. The invasion by France and England in Libya was another lie that caused enormous damage at that moment in our history. The invasion and the genocide carried out by Israel in Gaza is another very big lie. And now the bombing of Israel against Lebanon on what pretext? And now the invasion by the United States against Iran on what pretext? No president of a republic of one country can interfere in another country's election, ask for votes for another. Where is electoral sovereignty? Where is territorial sovereignty? Lula said recently. He also said, stop this damn blockade on Cuba. Let the Cuban people live their lives. Cuba has its problems, but they are Cuba's problems, not Lula's, not Trump's, not the empire's. And then he goes on to say, we are a peaceful region, no nukes. Our drones are used for agriculture and science, not war. But if we don't prepare for defense, we will be invaded, believing that the Trump regime's next invasion point may be Brazil. He also said the following, or recently AFP news agency explained, Brazil's President Lula recently banned a U.S. diplomat who wanted to visit Jair Bolsonaro, the right-wing extremist MAGA insurrectionist in Brazil, amid fears of U.S. meddling over there. And I'll just share with you recently what Lula said as well. When Donald Trump imposed those tariffs on Brazil unilaterally, he goes, Trump could have called, but instead he posted the tariff news on his website, a complete lack of respect, which is typical of his behavior of everyone. If Trump was living in Brazil and had done what he did at the Capitol, he would be on trial here too, because here in Brazil, the rule of law applies equally, he says. And then remember, Donald Trump imposed 50% tariffs on Brazil, and then Donald Trump tacoed out of that after continuing to attack Brazil over and over again because it was destroying the economy. I'll remind you, and then Lula stood his ground. I'll remind you when Lula gave an interview with Christian Amanpour. Here's what he said right here. Let's play it.
To make a decision and publish on the newspaper. That's not right work. That's impossible. And now President Trump to write a letter and putting as a condition, a precondition for negotiation. No.
Okay.
And that's very discretionary. I can't even believe in that. When I read the letter, I thought it was fake news when I saw the letter through the media. And then I thought it was a true letter that was signed by President Trump. So I can reassure you that Brazil, in the right moment, will give the right answer to the President Trump's letter. And in my address to the Brazilian people, I'm going to tell the Brazilian people what I'm thinking about all this. And sincerely, I can reassure you that Brazil does not enjoy troublemakers and trouble. Brazil likes to negotiate and peace. And that's how I act, and I think that's how all presidents should act. And this is, I think about President Trump too. That Brazil is an historic ally of the U.S. Brazil praises the economic relations that Brazil has with the U.S., but Brazil will not accept anything imposed on it, on the country. We accept negotiation and not imposition.
More from that interview with Amanpour. Let's play this clip.
Christian, I'd like to say something to the American people. If Trump was Brazilian and if he did what was happening at the Capitol Hill, he'd also be on trial in Brazil and possibly and he would have violated the Constitution. According to the justices, he could also be arrested if he had done that here in Brazil.
And remember that letter that Donald Trump sent back on July 9th, 2025? Here's what he said to Brazil. I knew and dealt with former President Jair Bolsonaro and respect him greatly, as did other leaders of countries. The way that Brazil has treated former President Bolsonaro, a highly respected leader throughout the world during his term, including by the United States, is an international disgrace. The trial should not be taking place. It is a witch hunt and should end immediately, due in part to Brazil's insidious attacks on free election and fundamental free speech rights of Americans, as illustrated by the Brazilian Supreme Court, which has issued hundreds of secret censorship orders to U.S. social media platforms, threatening them with millions of dollars in fines and eviction from the Brazilian social media market. Starting on August 1, 2025, will charge Brazil a tariff of 50% on any and all Brazilian products sent into the United States, separate from all sectoral tariffs. Goods transshipped to invade this 50% tariff will be subject to a higher tariff. Remember that phase when Donald Trump was doing all of that? Well, if it sounds familiar, look what Donald Trump just did today as soon as that meeting with Brazil ended. This is what he posted about Europe. Remember, he said he was imposing 25% tariffs on Europe, but that was, again, crushing the market. So Donald Trump tacoed out of this. Here's what he just posted today. May 7, 2026. I've been waiting patiently for the EU to fulfill their side of the historic trade deal. We agreed in Turnberry, Scotland, the largest trade deal ever. A promise was made that the EU would deliver their side of the deal, and as per agreement, cut their tariffs to zero. I have agreed to give her until our country's 250th birthday, or unfortunately, their tariffs would immediately jump to much higher levels. So he's doing that shtick again, and here's what he said about Lula. Just concluded my meeting with Lula, the very dynamic president of Brazil. We discussed many topics, including trade and specifically tariffs. The meeting went very well. Our representatives are scheduled to get together to discuss certain key elements. Additionally, meetings will be scheduled over the coming months as necessary. Donald J. Trump. We'll keep you posted every step of the way. Hit subscribe. You may think you're subscribed, but may not actually be subscribed. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks for watching.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.